Good afternoon. I'd like to call the Los Osos Groundwater Basin Management Committee meeting to order. We'll start off with a roll call.
Yeah, catching up with you, Director Zimmer. Give me one sec. All right. Okay. Director Cesena? Here. Director Gibson? Here. Director Reinecke?
Here.
Chair Zimmer?
Here.
Great, all four parties present.
All right, pledge allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, item 4, board member comments.
This is for non-agenda items. I don't know if this would be considered on the agenda as it's an update in the executive director's report, but I did attend the December 16th County Growth Management Ordinance meeting and read the purveyor's letter to the Board of Supervisors, the growth management recommendation letter.
Okay, all right.
So for S&T, I think the thing that we'll just add here at this point is we would like to open our wells 1 and well 4 up to any testing that the BMC might want to conduct on them as upper aquifer wells with potential for treatment and mitigation of the upper aquifer.
Yeah, okay. I think that's well received and something that has been on my mind too. You know, we've talked about what are our projects that we can implement, and I think that, you know, utilizing the upper aquifer basin seems like we're at that point, you know, and let's just get a baseline of are those wells an option or not, I think would be the first step, and then we can take it from there. So I don't, any thought on whether to do that just between Golden State and S&T, or do we want to kind of manage that through the BMC and kind of have Dan coordinate that and we can tie that into a BMC project?
I mean, I think there's probably value in coordinating the BMC, as you know, there may need to be exchange agreements and other things amongst the purveyors. So, I mean, we're happy to add that to our party staff meeting agendas and continue those discussions with direction from the board.
Okay, I agree with that.
And Mr. Chairman, if I could, I think that's great news. And it fits right in with the meeting we had with LOCSD and Golden State and our Public Works Department about how we can interact to help facilitate denitrification. One of those questions is what to do with the waste stream of that process. And I think we're moving forward, getting defined the questions that need to be answered, and hopefully we can make some progress in seeing if we can make that the most efficient possible so that the cost effectiveness of that approach is the best it can be.
Yeah.
We had a meeting, we did have a meeting at the county, what, last week or the week before? Time flies when you're having fun. I can't remember exactly.
It was last week, right?
Okay, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. So I agree, you know, let's bring that to Dan and the staff. Maybe put that on your staff agenda and then come back at our next meeting with substance for us to review.
Yeah.
All right. Sounds good. You know, I would also like to make a comment regarding the can and will serve letter process. I know there's been questions brought before Golden State regarding the can and will serve letters. And I just want to let this board and the community know that we have put significant effort into looking at not only the PUC rules, but case studies that kind of track can and will serve letters and our authority to issue them or not issue them. And basically, it comes down to the Public Utility Code 451 and our obligation to provide service to all customers within our service area. So not whether they're actually receiving water or not, but also all customers in our service area, and then looking at those case studies. And so our opinion on this is that we would have to venture down into a moratorium type scenario before we could halt issuing can and will serve letters. And we understand we're at a point in the basin where we have to look at the basin carefully. We've got a lot of new information to review this year. We have projects on the book, just like what we're talking about with the upper aquifer. Our whole basis of this committee is really to implement our basin management plan and maximize the use of the basin for the entire community. So still committed to that effort. There's going to come a point or not where we have to make that decision. And so I just want to let everybody know that, we have talked among the purveyors and trying to make that united force together, or united decision as one force together to say, okay, now we need to shift our effort. But right now, our efforts are focused on the basin and management and trying to work with the county and the growth initiatives they have in place. And so there'll be more to come on this, but just wanted to kind of announce that. I've received quite a few inquiries about our can and will serve letter and our authority to issue them. So wanted to put that out there for everybody.
And Mr. Chairman, if I might, any amount of that analysis that you could share with the county would be really helpful for us to understand the constraints and the process. I would, let me put it differently, not so much the constraints, but the process by which you address those things. And, I too reiterate the pledge for the county to be a constructive partner in the alternative to considering moratorium status or the cessation of can and will serve letters, which is the efforts to expand the sustainability and the resiliency of the basin. So,
Right.
Like I say, but I'm sure our land use experts would be very interested in hearing about
What that is.
how you've analyzed it, and what the PUC rules you are bound by.
Okay. And yeah, just a little bit more on that about the rules, so to speak, that we have in our tariff, that conditions service, there's special conditions under each tariff area that we have. And so what it would entail would be a condition that would state that we don't have adequate water, but along that lines, that whole analysis, there would have to be an exit plan too, of like, we're going to implement.
How do you get out?
Yeah. So I'll try to see what I can put together and give you a little better, more scenario. Sure. Yeah. Okay. I believe we need to go to public comment on this. Board member comments?
An agenda item? Yes.
Yes. Board member comments, agenda item. Yeah.
All right, if you have a public comment and you're in the boardroom, please come up to the podium. And if you're online, please raise your hand and we will take any public comments in the boardroom first.
And this is public comment dealing with what you just were discussing?
Yeah. Our comments,
Okay.
yes.
So as you know, Mr. Zimmer, I had sent you an email discussing the Public Utility Code 451. And I've also talked to the CPUC about that. Yes, you do have to be prepared and able to service all of your clients, but that doesn't mean that you have to do it. It means that you have all of your equipment needs to be in operation. You need to be able to service those people that are hooked up. But no, you do not need to issue will serve letters. And when I asked the CPUC about that, and I spoke to several of their agents, they said that it was not the intent of Utility Code 451, And it's not the intent of the utility or of the commission to have a purveyor have to issue will serve letters on a basin that is not sustainable and is having seawater intrusion and is in overdraft. So I would like you to reconsider that, and it all has to do with interpretation. Thank you.
It looks like there's no further public comment in the boardroom or online, so we can take it back to the board.
I'm willing to comment on that since I made the comment. So that's what I was inferring to, that we'd have to have a condition in our will serve letter that would state why we can't do that. And so right now, we have agreed to a basin plan and to manage the basin, and that's the course we're on. I'm not saying that we're not willing to go down that or discuss that when the time comes, but we're going to do that united as the purveyors. It's not going to be a Golden State not versus the other purveyors and how they do it. We'll do it together through this forum. We've met and talked about that. So, like I said, when and if that time comes, we'll go down that venture. But right now, we're obligated to provide service unless there's a condition in our tariff that states why we can't. All right. Okay, into public comment. We'll move on to item 5, special presentations. We have none today, so we're going to continue on. Consent agenda. We have 3 items on the consent agenda. Approval of the 2026 financial report, approval of proposed reserved fund use, and approval of the minutes from our special November 12th, 2025 BMC meeting.
Thank you, Chair Zimmer. Yeah, we have our standard financial reports for the months of November and December. We also have a budget overage approval for the board's consideration for 2 items. One is BMC admin and facilitation. The other is legal counsel. You've probably heard me say this before. 2025 was a big year with a lot of initiatives, required quite a bit of additional technical and administrative support. We did, on the admin side, ramp down level of effort in November and December, but there still was a cost associated with the November meeting and other activities. And then legal, if you'll recall, we had only approved a budget of $5,000, and so we exceeded that slightly by $500. And so we have to bring that back for board approval. So total overage $10,000. We have $12,000 remaining of reserves from last year, and then we're anticipated to have unused funds from 2025 for other tasks that would be available as well. We do need to roll over approximately, I think it's $37,000 to fund the monitoring project, the geophysics project that we didn't get completed this year that we would want to carry over into next year. But the total reserves currently is sitting around $62,000. So we have somewhere around $33,000 or so in reserve funding if you take into account anticipated unspent funds in 2025. And then finally, the meeting minutes from our last meeting.
Okay, I do have a question. So I think in order to ask that question, I got to pull it from the consent, right? Or can I ask a clarifying question? Okay. So on that, you're asking for the funds to come from the leftover reserve funds, right? But why aren't we taking the funds from the balance of 2025? It looked like I'm on page 3 of 2022 of the cost summary. So we have 34,000 in there. Why wouldn't we just utilize it and just leave that alone? Because I'm thinking there may be some additional funding for our monitoring well that's been deferred.
Yeah, and essentially it's the same money. It's just what bucket we put it in and how we track it. In reality, if you look at the other financial reports, it's all in, our reserve fund. So, yeah, we could take that direction. We haven't closed out 2025 yet, just because there's just a couple outstanding things that we haven't fully finalized. I think there's one minor invoice from the peer review that we need to bring forth to the board at a future meeting, and then I think that's primarily the reason we haven't closed it out. But once we close it out, then yeah, you would have the option of pulling it from unspent 2025 reserves or unspent 2024 reserves.
Okay.
But,
Yeah, and I'm not partial either way. I just wanted to make sure we were going to roll that into a reserve bucket at some point.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you. No questions. Okay. Public comment on consent?
If you have a public comment and you're in the boardroom, please come up to the podium. And if you're online, please raise your hand and we will take any public comments in the boardroom first. It looks like there's no public comment in the boardroom or online, so we will take it back to the board.
I'll move approval of consent.
I'll second that.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion passes 4-0.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to item 7, public comments for items not appearing on the agenda.
If you are in the boardroom, please come up to the podium. And if you're online, please raise your hand and we will take any public comments in the boardroom first.
Hi, Lynette Brooks. I just wanted to acknowledge Chuck and Ron Munns going to that Board of Supervisors meeting. I think it was very important they were there. I hope I'm not misquoting Mr. Munns, but I think he was trying to make the point that even the 2,000 acre feet sustainable yield isn't real yet, because you don't, I'm not exactly sure, but the system isn't operating that way. And it seemed like he said it may be years before that even happens. Hopefully I did not misquote them. I would also like to urge the BMC to send the letter requesting 0% growth to the Coastal Commission, because they still seem to be operating under the, we're sustainable thing and looking at the old model and the old numbers of sustainable yield. And then just one more thing, it kind of goes back to item 4, but it was at Mark's last comment, so I didn't stand up for that. He said you would need some kind of a moratorium or something for Golden State to not issue will serve letters. You guys wrote the moratorium. You sent it to the county. The BMC wants 0% growth. So it seems like you guys have, as the committee managing the groundwater, you've made that moratorium. So I was a little confused by his comment. That's all. Thank you.
It's interesting.
Say their name out loud. Renee Nicole Good, Alex Preddy. Good afternoon, Patrick McGinley, the Sustainability Group. What makes this meeting special? There is nothing on this agenda that addresses the sustainability of our water basin. There is nothing on this agenda that addresses the 5 major issues that Beth Reineke outlined over 6 months ago. Not one. They've never been addressed. There is nothing on this agenda that addresses your new sustainable yield of 2,000 acre feet yearly, or the fact that there is no 20% buffer, or that your extraction rate will still be the same 1,850 acre feet yearly that the transient model told you was overdrafting our basin. There's nothing on this agenda that addresses that the county snubbed their nose at you and increased the GMO to 0.4%. when you asked it to remain at 0 until the new model can show the basin is sustainable. There is nothing to address the rising chloride level or the drop in water level. There is nothing on this agenda that indicates you, the water purveyors, have spoken to the Coastal Commission and shared your concerns of our basin being an overdraft with seawater intruding further inland, making the basin unable to support new development. There is nothing to address that Golden State Water Company is still issuing will serve letters knowing our basin is in overdraft. Why have you 3 purveyors buried your heads in the sand and allowed Bruce Gibson to carry on as a member, theoretically representing the county's recycled water and wastewater plant as is written in the stipulated judgment? Bruce Gibson represents the planning and building department and has no desire to help build a sustainable water basin in our community. Fact is, he will fight against it if it impedes his drive for a build-out of the community. Bruce Gibson is not with our community, and he has no legitimate place on this board. He has lied about the health of our basin using flawed metrics and an unreliable steady-state model to claim that our basin is sustainable. And you, the guardians and managers of our only water supply, have done nothing to question this or to protect our basin. You have never appealed one of the misappropriated developments the county has pushed through, developments that are using more water of a basin that the Department of Water Resources says is in critical overdraft, and the transient model agrees with. When appeals are made, I have to go before the Board of Supervisors to present the case. Never have you once written a letter of support nor commented during these appeals, a time I have to listen to Supervisor Gibson trite diatribe as he slanders the sustainability group and me personally. I now just leave after my presentation and let Mr. Gibson slander away. It's time you do this work. It's not our job. We're not purveyors. We are not the parties listed in the stipulated judgment. You are. You can petition the court. You can talk with the Coastal Commission. You could declare a building moratorium by not using will-serve letters, and you could sue the county for breach of contract in not working jointly
Thank you,
with
Patrick.
to establish a sustainable
Patrick, your
basin
time's
for our
up.
community and current population. Thank you.
Hello, I'm John Lynch. I'm on the LOCAC board, and I want to offer a more hopeful way of looking at the picture and examine the basin from one angle that I don't think has been discussed in any detail, and that is the ag sector of our basin that, as everybody here knows, takes 1/3 of the water supply, and yet you guys are not asking them to contribute to the issue that, has gripped the community. And I think that's, a strategy that we could embrace as a group. Hey, what can we do regarding ag? And this is an issue, as again, everybody knows, is a statewide issue. And the formula they've come up with is, ag uses a lot of California's water. And the formula is, let's reduce that amount of water. Let's look at land retirement. Let's repurpose some land for other uses so there is water left for the rest of us. Now, this is a common strategy statewide, as I mentioned, and one that we could look at here. Consider this idea. We have a wastewater treatment plant and no solar energy next to it, but there could be. And of course, it's a long road to secure money for a solar project that would power our wastewater treatment plant. And then the land on which that solar power plant, a solar facility is located will no longer pump water, and the farmer who is leasing or selling the land would be compensated. So we're talking about trying to find a willing seller or a person who farms land out in our basin, willing to give up that land for some compensation. This happens everywhere. There's another idea, hey, let's pay them to not pump for several years. This could have an immediate benefit for the basin as we're struggling for every acre foot. And I've been a critic of the idea that that stopping growth is going to result in any substantial acre foot savings. And your models are telling you we may be way off. We may need to save a lot more water. And yet the best we can come up with is a strategy to save, basically an eye drop worth of water. Could you give me just another minute? Yeah. So I'm just calling for a strategy discussion that you guys could have that may make a difference. And we could debate it out and see what potential there is. But if we never talk about it like it has not been discussed, then we won't make a real dent in our acre feet shortage, which I mentioned, ag takes a third of it. And if you look at the crops they're growing, it's mostly hay. So anyway, I think there's a way to accomplish this by looking at the ag sector. Thank you.
All right, looks like there's no further public comment in the boardroom, so we'll move to online. All right, Jeff Edwards, all you have to do is unmute yourself.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Jeff Edwards. And as most of you know, the State Water Project is becoming an increasingly important project to complement our groundwater basin extractions. However, much of the discussion has been focused on the intertie pipeline, and that certainly is an important part, the roughly 2.7-mile intertie pipeline connecting the Chorro Valley pipeline to Los Osos. That is important, and as most of you know, the construction documents are in preparation now. Hopefully they'll be available sometime this year. But an equally important component to State Water Project deliveries is actually the water to put in the pipeline. And our county has a limited quantity of available state water, specifically 4,830 acre feet. And that's allocated to 11 subcontractors in our county. And this 4,830 acre feet represents our county's rights to conveyance and treatment capacity through the coastal branch of the State Water Project. A couple members of those 11 subcontractors include Morro Bay and OCSD and Oceano, Shandon. And our Board of Supervisors, as Supervisor Gibson knows, has enacted or updated their policies regarding state water. And it's critical now, I believe, to achieve or obtain the entitlements to that Table A water. There are several of the subcontractors that want to reduce some or all of their entitlements. So we have willing sellers, as Los Osos is a willing buyer, and we need help moving that forward in spite of what appears to be a fairly clear path. I would call on Supervisor Gibson to make this a priority before he leaves his position as a supervisor. This can be done. We need both the pipeline and the water entitlement to qualify for financing to actually build the pipeline. Again, this is critically important. We've talked about 200 acre feet. I think we need to go ahead and just understand that amount's going to be less than optimal. And I believe we need to go to the 600 acre feet that's been discussed for many years, that we actually have dedicated capacity in the conveyance system in Chorro Valley to accommodate that. So let's think in terms of 700 acre feet. Please, Supervisor Gibson, make that a priority before you leave. Thank you very much.
All right, there is no further public comment online or in person, so we'll bring it back to the board.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. Well, I appreciate the comments. Some of them we discussed and others, but John, I appreciate your proactive and solution comments that, I think we from what I recall early on, we looked at significant ag opportunities, but maybe we need to dust that off and take a look at that. Is there opportunities that you talked about a pay not to pump option? I was just engaged in some Central California discussions that they do that. That is a program that they have. They're paid to not produce anything on their lands. And so, but I appreciate the solution oriented. Maybe that's something we can talk about at the staff level also. As we, I anticipate we're going to have a suite of projects that we look at throughout the year, and maybe that's one we can put in there too. Something of that, something along that line, just to review the ag, where we've been and what we've done, to talk about it at staff, maybe develop what that looks like. I don't have it framed right now, but maybe through discussion with staff, we could develop something in line with ag. And then, yes, of course, the state water project is a very important project. It's becoming more important for us to do also. Any other comments?
Yes, this is something I think we've thrown out briefly in passing, but I guess maybe we need to take a formal action, copying the growth management recommendation letter to the Coastal Commission. I think that would be appropriate, and I guess I'd like to know what it would take to send that copy to them. Do we need a vote or just a courtesy letter? Can we direct staff to do that?
Yeah.
It's public record.
My initial thought on that is that we wrote that letter intended for the sustainability number, right? And so to use it in a different context or format, I'm a little leery of doing that, but I'm not opposed to sending a letter to the Coastal Commission. Does that make sense? To use that exact letter, the way it was written and intended and framed towards to the county, and now we just simply hand that over. So I don't have the letter in front of me. I haven't looked at it for that view, but a little hesitant of doing that.
You'd rather
Similar-
rework a letter?
Well,
Okay.
similar to the letter we sent to the county regarding the growth ordinance that got sent to the Coastal
I
Commission.
was just thinking of a cover letter with that attached, something simple like that.
And maybe it would definitely be an attachment, I think. So maybe it's a letter with that being attached or something of that nature.
Mr. Chairman, if I might, I mean, certainly would be fine to forward the exact letter you sent to the county, to the Coastal Commission. I do believe they already have it. Our planning department communicated that letter to the Coastal Commission. We had discussions with them before we entered the growth management ordinance, and they indicated no issues with the path that the county took forward.
Mm-hmm.
You could certainly confirm that independently if you want, but that was certainly an important point for county planning to consider before they came to the board.
Yeah, thank you. That's a good point.
I want to, let's follow through with that because I don't know what Coastal thinks. After listening to staff and this is at planning commission level too, I'm not sure what they say because we're not in the room. So I would like to follow through with that letter.
Okay. I would support following through with that letter, with our review and oversight before it goes out.
Of the cover? Yeah,
Yeah.
that's fine. That's fine. But I just kind of want to keep that process going because, to hear staff reports that talk about no significant changes since the EIR that was the basis for the community plan being approved, I just have trouble hearing that. And if Coastal hasn't heard it, well, they have. Maybe they're wanting to hear it from us. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know what goes on in these conversations.
I'm fine if the committee, I support the committee sending that letter to the Coastal Commission again, and I don't know if Mr. Reilly can confirm or correct, but I do believe that they're well aware of the letters that the BMC sent, but I have absolutely no problem sending that again.
All right, let's prepare to do that, Dan. Yep.
I guess just to clarify, I guess what I think I'm hearing is that the board would like staff to sort of draft a cover letter for the board's review for submission to sending the letter to the Coastal Commission. So bring this item back with a draft cover letter. Is that, or?
Yeah,
Okay.
that makes sense. Yeah. So we kind of understand that they haven't seen it and reviewed it, but we're
Maybe
doing
we're
it
just
in a
correcting, yeah,
formal-
oversight. We should
yeah,
have, we should have sent it to them.
yeah. A formal process, and maybe there'll be additional discussion that develops from it. Okay.
And that, I guess just one thing to add back to the topic of land repurposing, I believe that there's an item on the Board of Supervisors agenda for next Tuesday for
Paso Robles groundwater
Paso
basin.
Robles specific, but my very, very high level understanding is to be talking about something, a program potentially similar that is up for consideration in the Paso subbase.
Okay.
Just for the public's benefit and the board's.
Yeah, it'd be good to listen in on that and see what's going on there.
Afternoon session on Tuesday.
Okay, good. Okay, any other comments?
Yeah, so regarding, again, going to John's comment, I appreciate that too. He's, talking about the 30% of ag users. I think that this is a good opportunity to remind everyone that the ag users, so 50% of the users in the basin are not falling under the same adjudication. I mean, they're not parties as we are as purveyors. And so it is a really important point that so many of the users, so much of the water extracted is not governed in the same way that we are. And I think that we need to close those gaps in any way we can. So there's that. And then as far as the pipeline goes, I have to say, I agree that getting as much support from the county on the pipeline and the development of not just the pipeline itself, but the water resources that come along with it, super important. I would love to see more support coming from that direction.
Yeah, we certainly stand by to help in any way we can with the CSD's effort to get that pipeline permitted. And we will be having a conversation about state water allocations, although the operating model that the CSD is embracing is more for excess water. And that's really in terms of the frame of state water, because of the reliability issues of the state water system, estimated to deliver about 60% of what it was originally designed for, and the fact that given the variability of rainfall and as climate change evolves, the variability of the deliveries from year to year, the overall thinking for county public works is that any use of state water by agencies that don't use it now should really be framed in terms of a resiliency issue, which is exactly how the CSD is approaching it. So it fits very well, certainly through conversations with Public Works and the Water Resources Advisory Council committee. The appropriate scale and mode of use of state water for the CSD pipeline is certainly a top question. A top issue that we're eager to see discussed.
Yeah, when that water's available, bringing it into the basin.
It's perfect. It's really a perfect use of state water. And the revised rules on state water allow us to store a considerable amount more in San Luis Reservoir. We can sell it to virtually any agency. And a couple of meetings ago, we sold some into the Central Valley. It's good revenue for the state water fund. We'd love to be selling that internal to the county. That's actually first priority, a higher priority than selling it outside the county. And so with a pipeline, CSD could be very much lined up to participate there. It's good stuff.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. We'll close public comments not on appearing on the agenda. Move to item 8, Los Osos Basin Update Report.
Thank you, Chair Zimmer. Yeah, Los Osos Basin update report, where we provide an update on ongoing initiatives. I just want to hit a couple of items that we have updates for. The first is the water recycling funding program study. So that was a grant-funded project to develop a transient model and then utilize that transient model to evaluate different supplemental water and recycled water project opportunities to improve sustainability of the basin. A final draft of that report was presented to the BMC, and subsequently a final has been submitted to the state board. The state board has approved both the draft and the final versions, and happy to report that the CSD is on track to receive the full grant reimbursement. And so that portion of the project, or that project, largely is wrapped up at this point. But as was pointed out earlier in comments by the board, that's just the starting point for the next phase, is looking at the recommendations from that report for how sustainable yield can be improved in the basin, and those primarily focused on enhanced upper aquifer nitrate water treatment and production, the state water intertie pipeline as discussed earlier, and then additional connections for non-potable recycled water use as those become available. So, but yeah, happy to note that yeah, we've received full state approval of that project. Other initiative is the monitoring program improvements, the Sweet Springs well, not really a new update, but that's an ongoing project. We're waiting, primarily on HCP credits. We got an update that those credits should be available in March, as I believe. And so we're working through the other elements of the project, getting the encroachment permits and other necessary things from the county to be able to go out to bid and construct that additional new monitoring well that will improve our ability to track conditions within the basin. And that project is also largely grant funded as well, or fully grant funded through a grant from the community-based water quality grant program through the Rose Foundation. Other items of note and sort of ongoing is the update of the metrics, the basin metrics, the water level, chloride, upper aquifer nitrate metrics. That's an initiative that's ongoing. Our consultant, Cleith Harris Geologist, is evaluating opportunities to improve those metrics, and we anticipate bringing those recommendations to the board here in the first quarter of 2026, with hopefully we can at least have a chance to talk about it, if not approved, before we get our spring water level data and metric update. So that looking forward to bringing more information on that to the board here soon. And then moving on to the land use elements, there is description of the County Board of Supervisors adoption of a resolution of the maximum allocation for 2026 of 0.4%, as well as the BMC's submission of the letter outlining a growth rate recommendation of 0%. We kind of already talked about that, but just that those updates are available. Update on the HCP credits would be covered. Data on the retrofit to build certificates, 0 certificates issued from October through December of 2025. And then moving on to the Public Works Water Recycling Facility, we've got the complete table of recycled water deliveries for disposal and for irrigation uses. And there are a number of asterisks on the table, and in this case, these are, I think, exciting asterisks. They indicate that we brought on new users to the recycled water system in 2025, most specifically Los Osos Middle School, Monarch Grove Elementary School, and the Los Osos Community Park. So I look forward to seeing how much recycled water we can deliver in a full calendar year in 2026, now that we have those facilities connected to the recycled water program. And really the benefit of that is any acre foot delivered to those facilities is offsetting an acre foot of water from the purveyor systems. And so significant benefit to basin sustainability. And that concludes my basin update report. Oh, sorry. Premature. We do have an update on expansion well number 2 in program C. I believe that the CSD's Bay Oaks well has got the necessary permits, and testing is anticipated to go online it went online yesterday. Hooray! Yes.
Solved now?
Yeah. So that's a exciting milestone. That's completion of the second well in program C, and in progress towards implementation of the basin plan.
Nice. Congratulations. I know that's been a journey.
Really?
I have a question, kind of a sidebar that maybe Supervisor Gibson will know more about. Cambria's got similar issue regarding denitrification, brine issues with their, and they have some kind of a experimental project program going.
Yeah.
I mean, is that similar enough to what's going to happen here that we should be anticipating eagerly the results from this trial, whatever's going on?
Absolutely. I don't know. I absolutely don't know.
Okay.
Cambria Community Services District runs a brackish water desalination plant under an emergency permit from the county. They're going to be coming to the coast to the plant, our planning commission in February to seek the permanent permit for it. Their issue there is brine disposal, and there are a couple of options for them to do. Right now, when they run the plant, which is not often, they truck it, but they can't. And I can't remember exactly the company, but there was a company that ran a pilot project in December for about 10 days, 10, 12 days, where they have technology that takes the brine stream and takes 97% of the water out of the brine stream and puts that water into the drinking water system. So it's like a second tier of desalination, reduces the waste stream to a more like a paste, is the way it's described to me, that can then be landfilled, and much less of the volume, so it cuts the trucking cost. Details of that pilot are being worked up. But when I referenced the meeting with the LOCSD in Golden State regarding denitrification, Mr. Munns, Mr. Zimmer were both there. We're looking into how, if we might approach the same company to deal with the waste stream of the denitrification, to see if they have some different ideas, other technologies that can address a number of other issues, including PFAS. TBD.
Okay, but that test has occurred.
The test has occurred.
Good.
Indeed.
Okay.
So very exciting. And while I have the floor, I wonder if I could suggest to my water purveyor colleagues here, the one issue that I didn't see in the executive director's report regards the efforts at redistributing the pumping pattern in the basin in order to achieve the newly agreed upon sustainable yield. Public will recall that the sustainable yield of 2,000 acre feet per year was premised on optimizing the locations and amounts that are removed from the basin, and there would be a 5-year roll-in of that effort. I certainly understand from conversations with individual purveyors that there are a number of issues that need to be addressed, some challenges that may need to be overcome. But I was thinking that it would be a good standing item in the executive director's report to have updates on progress made toward achieving that optimized distribution and the challenges remaining to doing so, and hope my colleagues would agree to that. And perhaps as of our next meeting, we might get a brief update on where we are there.
Should at least have a thorough understanding of what's expected of each of the purveyors and a time frame, and that it would help us each to understand what the others are going through.
Exactly.
Because your challenges aren't the same as ours.
Right. Yeah. Okay, we can include that in our, it's not the executive director's report anymore, right, Dan? It's the Basin update, yeah. All right. Couple comments. How many credits does it take for our monitoring well? What are we looking at for those HCP credits? Is it significant or is it, I picture those as like a postage stamp area, so I can't imagine.
Yeah, so I don't know if I can put my finger on an exact number, but basically the full footprint of the construction area needs to receive credits. And it's,
$1.50 a square foot.
yeah, I mean, I think it was,
I have been planting the county right-of-way across the street from me for about 3 years now. I've got a good little native garden going there. Does that factor in?
I have to see if you're in the primary restoration area, but we can certainly get that number for you if you want.
It's significant. Yeah, when we got estimates from county planning, it was somewhere between $15,000 to $20,000 in credits. And it's, monitoring wells when they're done, yeah, are like this big from the surface, but when you're drilling them, the footprint is quite a bit with the drill rig and the ancillary equipment. So we've been working with county planning to try to minimize that as much as possible, but there's the requirements of the Habitat Conservation Plan that we need to comply with, along with any other construction related project. So yeah, we'll be bringing more information on that as we get closer to bidding or approving bids for the Sweet Springs monitoring well. But yeah, it's a relatively significant component.
Okay, and another question regarding the monitoring or the water level metric. I noticed the metric hasn't been updated. We kind of stalled the water level metric, right?
Yep.
Does it make sense to keep utilizing that old metric until you talked about in the spring coming back with evaluating the new metric, anticipating who knows how long that'll be. I just hate to stop, we go back to the 1970s on that monitoring and now we're stopped it. Is there a significant roadblock of continuing to look at that level and at least we have that ongoing data?
Yeah, yes, there's a relatively significant roadblock. Like, we could put the water levels from the same wells in the metric, but the reality is it's not the best scientific practice to compare the historic data to the new data because we're really measuring different portions of the aquifer. Now, we can put that data in the table, just so we can see what it would look like. And then, an asterisk that says, as of this date, this well was modified and that led to an immediate shift of the water level in this well of 6 feet, or I forget the details of how much it shifted. But the reality is before we were measuring the combined water level in zones D and E, and now we're just measuring the water level in E. And my recollection is the water level dropped relatively significantly because we're now just measuring that portion of the basin, whereas before we were really getting the water level from zone D. So I guess my recommendation would be that maybe we move through metric updates this spring, and that then we can, and we'll still have to come up with a mechanism for how we're going to correlate the old metric to the new metric, but that we just prioritize trying to get a new metric developed and tracking that. But yeah, you'll see in the annual report, you'll see, how Cleith Harris characterized it, and we'll have the opportunity to review and comment, and you'll see how it's characterized in a later item today. But
all right, sounds good. My last comment here, the new urban irrigation uses that we have, you just know if anybody paid attention to that chart, but when they first started those connections and started using water, they were at like 16 acre feet tailing to the end of December where they were only using 1.5 or 1.15 rain, winter, kind of typical with pattern usage. So hopefully we'll see that kind of do the bell curve and ramp up in the spring and then peak in the summer. but I don't know if anybody commented that. I just wanted to kind of highlight that.
Yeah, no, it's a good note. That is one of the challenges of landscape irrigation recycled water projects is it's irrigation demand dependent. So, large parts of the year with our Mediterranean climate, they're not using much water.
And to answer a quick question after a little internet search, HCP mitigation fees, $1.95 per square foot.
Is it okay if I have a couple comments too?
Come on, sure.
So related to the type, maybe you said it and I didn't hear the Title 19 retrofit to build. What is the status of that program? And is that at all affecting how many building permits we're seeing? I know I see that there are some approvals here, which we hadn't been seeing last year. So that's one thing I'm curious, and I'll wait for the answer to ask my next question.
So the question on where the county is with Title 19 and the practical, yeah, we're finding that securing, we have studied that. You remember the technical memo that indicated there were enough potential targets to I don't know, to offset 100 acre feet or thereabouts. What we're finding is since it's a voluntary program, the actual interest in becoming a place where a retrofit is installed has diminished somewhat. And so getting the retrofit credits is becoming increasingly challenging. Our planning staff is working on an update there, which might broaden the applicability, within the basin. Where do we have opportunities to reduce demand in a wider sense and or increase supply? We're trying to see if there's a way of working up an in lieu fee that would be contributed toward doing projects that would positively affect the sustainable yield, would accomplish essentially the same thing that the current Title 19. We'll be certainly bringing that before this committee as we do that. But somewhere in the first half of this year, I think we'll start seeing some thinking on that become public.
Oh, okay, but currently those are still a part of the.
That's absolutely, when we are the permits, the 25 permits that are allocations that would be let under the 0.4% growth rate require the 2-to-1, the existing 2-to-1 retrofit.
Okay, thank you for that. And then my last question is related to the metric updates. When we're looking at updating the metric, I mean, the metrics are so intertwined into our Basin plan. And I think our Basin plan could use a lot of updates, especially now that we have the new transient model. Now that we've kind of come full circle with all of that, where are we in the planning stages of potentially updating the Basin plan itself?
Yeah, it's something that's been brought up and I'd say discussed at a very high level. I think it's a good point. We updated the transient model. That, in a essence, sort of allowed us to update the projects section of the Basin plan, in terms of estimates of yield that the projects could provide and the updated estimates of cost. If we were to update the metrics, that would also sort of update that section of the plan. A comprehensive update of the Basin plan is something the BMC could consider. I think it's not the type of initiative that we can just fund with, administration. It would have to be a project, and I think we'd need to. It costs a relatively significant amount of money, I would think, to do a full update. But definitely something that we can pursue with the board and or party direction.
Well, I'll take this opportunity to say that I would recommend that. I think that it's an important document with regard to the Basin itself and our governance of the Basin. So I think working with an outdated document where we're kind of, I guess, taking all of these separate technical memos and everything and putting them together and then trying to go and reference those. It's kind of clunky, so.
Yeah, it's something we can bring to the staff meetings and discuss with the other purveyors.
Yeah, just the development of the plan, the original plan, that was done with the purveyors and in-kind services throughout the purveyors. The majority of that plan, when it was written, it really wasn't funded. We didn't have the structure that we have today. That came later. So I'm just thinking how this when I hear significant funding, it concerns me. I just don't know what we're getting into, but I agree with the overall sentiment that, we're at some point, we're going to have to modify what's in here and what we're doing. How do we go about that? Reflect back to the part of, there was supposed to be implementation of a funding mechanism for this committee here and our projects. And we went down and hired a consultant to evaluate that. We couldn't get to a point where there was an initiative that we could bring forward to the community that we thought was viable. And so we kind of held still. So we could dust something like that off if we wanted to fund some bigger projects, or we could, like Dan was mentioning, curtail something like what you're suggesting at the staff level and talk about what are these key items that we would start, would we start from scratch, which would be much more expensive, or are there a couple issues in there that we need to, like our monitoring our metrics and such. We definitely know that we have to do the water level metric, and so are there others that pertain to projects too, and such? Do we need to, I guess, look at the scope, at least starting at the staff level? Does that kind of make sense?
It makes sense. I think we have, the point of us putting money into the BMC every year is to, I think, work on initiatives like this. I mean, I don't know if or why it would fall outside the realm of any other project that we work on here. And as you're talking about it and saying, there's so many different things and it's such a significant lift, that tells me that the Basin plan needs to be updated. I mean, if it's that significant. So is it possible for us to get an estimate or something like that from Cleve Harris to tell us what it would take?
Maybe would we need to give them some direction about the sections that we thought needed updating? I guess that's kind of where I'd like to start. Maybe some kind of ad hoc little group here that you could lead. I don't know. I just
That's a good point, Chuck. I think there are certain sections that we don't need to touch. We don't need to do a full
Yeah, I think
rewrite by any
rather
means.
than just ask Cleve Harris, what would it take? I'd rather give them some direction about the areas that we think need attention.
Which would probably go back to staff, I would imagine.
Yeah, and we could definitely do to date, I don't think we've done sort of an assessment of, all right, these sections don't need to be updated. These sections do need to be updated.
Good start
that could be a good place to start, get a better understanding of the level of effort.
And you would start that at the staff level, is that correct?
I mean, yeah, that's a pretty low
Kind
level
of
of effort exercise, is just to assess the current basin plan with the knowledge of the work that's been done since 2015, and at least flagging how much of the plan would require an update.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
with AI these days, you'd probably do a little work for us. So.
Yeah. Yeah, because, it's more than Cleve that would be involved in that too. I mean, he would provide direction on some of the basin characteristics, but a lot of that was done through engineering, legal. I mean, it was a time-consuming, expensive project to get there. So defining that scope makes a lot of sense to me. Okay, any other comments? Good comments, good discussion. So let's take public comment on our Los Osos Basin update report.
If you are in the boardroom and you would like to make a public comment, please come up to the podium. And if you're online, please raise your hand and we will take public comments in the boardroom first.
Hi, Lynette Brooks. Most of this is probably more about what you were saying in the discussion than the actual update. But just a possibility on the water level metric, could you recalculate it through time without the well that has now changed? So I don't remember how many wells are in there, 5 wells maybe. Just use the 4 and keep using those so you at least have something moving forward until you can figure out exactly what to do. Bruce has been hinting about changes to Title 19 for quite some time now. He brings it up at the Board of Supervisors meeting for, why we can go ahead and have development because Title 19 will be changing. I would love to hear exactly what's changing because today he's kind of more like a replacement for Title 19. It will kind of do the same thing. So I would really like to get some more details on that at some point. And then I agree that parts of the Basin Plan are really out of date. I haven't read it in quite a while. But it seemed like the Basin Plan was made with the old definition of sustainable. Because a lot of it was about, we can drill all these new wells farther back. And, it was the old, well, let's get the wells out of the way. It wasn't that new, no, we're going to stop at this line. And that seems like one of the big parts with it. And then, of course, the transient model has yielded some other information. So I think parts of that would be good to update. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Robert Sarby. I had a couple of questions. I've been out of the country for a couple of months. I missed a couple meetings. I'm a little confused. Your transient model said 1,830 acre feet is not sustainable. Yet in October 2025, this board set a safe basin yield of 2,000 acre feet. So I'd like to hear how the board came up with 2,000 acre safe yield when you have a $500,000 study that said even 1,830 acre feet is not sustainable. Seems a little reckless. My second question is, I'd like to hear how the county has set a 0.4% growth limit when this board has told the county 0 building should occur in 2026. So my question is this board going to go to the judge of this adjudicated basin, or are we as the public going to have to sue the county to stop this building? Third, I'd like an explanation of why the chloride concentrations at the Broderson site increased from 140 to 330 milligrams per liter. Thank you.
Patrick McGivney, the Sustainability Group. When we speak of the sustainable yield, we're speaking of estimates. All the private wells and ag wells are unmetered and estimated in their extractions. With all the water conservation our community has done over the years, we shouldn't still be overdrafting our water basin. Yet the transient model in DWR says we are. We need to look at the unmetered wells. The basin plan says we need accurate data in our extraction rates. We don't have that. Much of the data entered into the transient model is based on estimates. Yes, they are based on best science available, but so was the steady state model. We've had good rainfall this year, and it's reported that the state is out of drought conditions. The lakes and reservoirs are full and the rivers are flowing, but that doesn't help our groundwater basin. We have very few catchment basins, and much of the runoff flows directly into the bay. Data shows our water levels are down and chloride levels are up. So we can't be depending on 1 year's worth of rain to declare the basin is sustainable. It's what the county did a few years ago, using the sustainable yield and the basin yield metric as indicators. And while residential use may have been down because we weren't watering our gardens, ag wells are usually on timers. And there were times during the downpours that rainbirds in the fields were still in full operation. If you're not aware, the county is still saying our basin is sustainable and they are processing development permits. The Coastal Commission has bought into this, saying that in a staff report on one of the appeals that the basin is adequate and sustainable for new development. If you don't agree, speak with the Coastal Commission, because in the works is a 12-unit hotel condo complex that will be used mostly as a rental units coming your way. There is no extra water just sitting out there for our use. State water is only Part B are a part of Part B, and it's not a guarantee. Not only will it be questionable, it will be expensive. You may not have land use authority, but you control our water. There's so much more you can do to help save our basin. Please do it. It's time to act before we run out of time. Thank you.
Sorry, I didn't like it.
Break it.
Richard
Randy?
Margetson. I thought there might be a little bit more discussion with the three purveyors of what happened at the Board of Supervisors meeting in December. Chuck was there, Ron was there. There were other, you might have watched it or whatever. It was a master class in spin. Mr. Gisman was totally on his game. The December surprises. All of a sudden, now he's agreeing with all the purveyors and 2,000 acre feet. I voted for that. And we still have the retrofit program. The retrofit program, Title 19 for Los Osos, has been screwed up since its inception. The first charts they couldn't even get right on how many credits were available for flushing a toilet. Had to be revised. Took 2.5 years to get that revision done. Now, people aren't interested. But at the Board of Supervisors meeting, part of the justification was, we have Title 19, that's 2-1. And then he calls up the Basin czar to justify that comment and said, we're really only talking about 3.5 acre feet or whatever the number was. You can't have it both ways. You can't have a Title 19 that is so screwed up and nobody wants to participate in it, and now start talking about changing it and maybe in lieu fees. Have any of the purveyors heard anything about what the county's proposal is on this? What the in lieu fees will be used for? How much of the in lieu fees and any in lieu fees in this county are used for administration that aren't even going in to actual saving water? They didn't even talk about the buffer. Wasn't even mentioned until after all it was done, and Chuck made a comment. I made a comment from the back room. But I guess if your basin czar is an employee of the county and not an independent individual looking or expert looking at what the issues are, I guess you want to keep your job, you want to keep your benefits, you want to keep your possibility of retirement. So you're pretty much going to go along with whatever the county says. It's how it's always worked with Los Osos in the county. And Chuck's right. What goes on in these meetings needs to be conveyed to the purveyors. It's your basin. It's your basin.
All right, looks like there's no further public comment in the boardroom, so we're going to move to online. Jeff Edwards, all you have to do is unmute yourself.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and committee members. My name is Jeff Edwards. And I want to cover a handful of items, starting with Broderson. I'd ask that the committee put Broderson on the agenda. That is the efficacy of Broderson. The deployment of our treated wastewater is our most important management tool for the basin. We know that anywhere from 25 to 40 acre feet per month are discharged at Broderson. However, it appears, I understand, that the mound that is supposed to develop as it's loaded has stopped building. That's the whole idea, is to build the mound sufficient to create a head to push through the clay lens into the lower confines. Well, if the mound has truly stopped developing and increasing, where's the water going? Spencer has said that Broderson's working. However, I have to question whether or not that's accurate. And so that's why I'd asked that this item be put on an agenda for discussion. The program C #2 well that the CSD is just finishing up was brought up. And as it turns out, the deployment of that well is not going to increase the safe yield of our basin at all, perhaps. Maybe a slight amount, but maybe nothing. So that's a big question. The program B, nitrate removal, has been suggested as it's elevating it to the top for consideration. And I would submit to you that that's problematic for not only water quantity purposes, but also qualitative issues. Nitrate removal doesn't remove all the other contaminants in the upper basin, the PFASs, the contaminants of emerging concern, etc. Moreover, by my estimation, the most yield we could get out of generating program B water is about 100 acre feet. I don't believe that would pass the cost benefit test. So that doesn't look all that viable. I wanted to go back to state water, and we heard that this might be temporary water or when it's available. That's not what Los Osos wants, in my opinion. We want table A water, some portion of the 4,830 acre feet, nothing less. And we want 600 acre feet up to that. So this idea of
Hey, Jeff, you're going to have to wrap it up, okay?
I will be happy to. This squishy idea of maybe, part-time water, no, that's absurd. Lastly, I'll close with saying that the idea that we're using treated wastewater to irrigate the schools, the numbers are insignificant. And there also the cost benefit ratio fails to pass the smell test, frankly. Thank you.
Thank you.
There's no further public comment in the boardroom or online, so we'll take it back to the board.
Okay, thank you. We heard quite a few recommendations. Taking note on those as we develop and move into our staff discussion about projects and what we're going to be looking at in the future, I think encompasses those. And so I don't know if you wrote much of that down, Dan, but looking at some of those, I think, a lot of good ideas were brought before us. We need to talk about that. Any other?
Yeah, I did capture a lot of those. Maybe I could just help address some of them. They commented about the water level metric update, removing one of the well that was modified. I think that's a good one. It's something we can consider. At least we can see what the trend in the other wells that didn't get modified. There was a question about the 1,800 versus 2,000 acre feet per year. I would point the speaker to the agenda packet for the October, I think it was October 12th special meeting. That outlines how the 2,000 acre feet per year number was developed in the 5-year transition period. The Broderson chloride, I think we can cover that on the next item. And then there was a comment about the efficiency of Broderson. There were scenarios, or was a scenario in the water recycling funding study specifically looking to address the efficiency of Broderson questions. So I would point them to that. Those were the ones I thought.
And then just one question on using the 4 wells for the water level metric. Is that viable or not?
Yeah, I mean, we can, take the data that we have for the metric, remove the one well completely for all the years, and then just say what the average water level of the remaining 4 has been, and that is something that we could project. It won't, again, be something we can necessarily directly compare to the current water level metric results from, our past, but
Yeah.
would be comparable to itself.
Yeah, and then my last comment is just the Broderson. I don't recall exactly what that look at was when we did it for the recycling water, but I know, the fact is that that is a significant amount of water, and that is a tool. We definitely, I'll go back and look at that a little bit and see. I don't recall it off the top of my head, but I don't think we should brush that off if we've already looked at it, because there's just so much water there.
Yeah, I mean, I pulled it up. The report states that Broderson provides a 25% basin benefit versus project yield, or how much you dispose of. So it is benefiting basin sustainability, not at the highest percentage of other potential uses. But those other uses have costs. But yeah, that's why the recommendation said additional landscape irrigation use of recycled water at the schools. That's a higher percentage of benefit. The intertie is obviously just wet water. And then the upper aquifer nitrate had an 84% benefit, so a higher percentage, but obviously has costs associated with it. So it's just balancing benefits and costs, which is something we have to do a lot, unfortunately.
And Mr. Chairman, you certainly recall that the roughly estimated cost of each alternative was laid out in that
Pretty
report,
high,
which showed that the two that were worth immediate pursuit were the pipeline intertie and the denitrification. So I think we're acting appropriately on that.
Thank you. Okay, we'll close.
Could I make a
I'm sorry.
couple comments?
Sure, of course you can.
I getting back to Mr. Seavy's point about the 1800 versus the 2000, it's there in that memo. But that was one of the things that upset me at the December 16th hearing, is that there was really no allowance for the fact that it's going to take 5 years and millions of dollars to hopefully get to the point where we've got a 2,000 acre sustainable yield estimate. That is really critical. It wasn't mentioned, as neither was the 20% buffer that we really try and maintain, which really drops things down to about 1,600 acre feet. So those things did upset me quite a bit. There's one other thing. We heard a lot about Title 19 and briefly about a 10 to 12 unit condominium project. I think it's up to 12 now. They're not really sure what it's going to be because it's been continued till March, so that there can be further discussions about whether the project is even an allowable use in that area. So there's quite a bit of scramble going on there. But one of the things that I was told is that the Title 19 credits are all attained for that project, and they all came from the Van Bearden buildings. The existing buildings were retrofitted. And it seems to me that there's a wonderful case study to be had there for the efficacy of the Title 19 projects. The whole program is because you don't have the opportunity typically to go chase each retrofitted toilet, each washing machine, too many different residences, whatever. These apparently were all done, assumed one time. We should be able to track that, and there'd be a wonderful case study. If that moves ahead at the Planning Commission, I think that should be a condition of approval. And that's it.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I wasn't aware that those came from Van Bearden there.
That's
I thought
what I
that
was
was all
told.
new.
That's what I was
Yeah,
told.
yeah. Or maybe there's a list of what Van Bearden needed to build out, right?
I think that should be thoroughly checked, because that's a lot of credits when, a single family residence is having trouble finding them.
Yeah, and the timing of the pumping plant plan is that we struggled with that and talked a little bit about it. The fact is we're pumping under that amount even without the modified pumping. Is that correct? So there was a little bit of time. That's why we agreed to that timing. But you're right. I mean, 5 years to implement some of these, they're going to be costly. I think I agree with what we mentioned earlier.
I think
Let's
that.
lay that out and
I
see
think that
what
would
does
help
that look
us
like.
maybe keep the focus on the fact that
Yeah.
there are things that need to be done before we can get to that.
Right. Good point. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and close the Basin Plan Update Report. We'll move to item 9, action items. We've got 3 items on the list. First one is appointment of BMC officers for candidate year 2026.
Yes, so item 9A, appointment of BMC officers. Sorry, let me just get back to where I need to be. This is something that we do annually. And just jump into it. I mean, our current BFC officers are Director Zimmer is the chair, Director Sesena is the vice chair, Director Reinicke is the secretary, and Director Gibson as the treasurer. Officers may serve multiple consecutive terms, resign at any time. And I guess the secretary and treasurer may be removed or replaced by an affirmative decision of the Basin Management Committee. I don't know that we've had to do that, but it's a provision that's included in our stipulated.
Still moved in the case of the treasurer.
But I would defer to the board on how they want to approach officers.
Okay.
I don't know, unless there's strong feelings that there's an officer who would like a different position, or strong feeling that there are officers that want to keep the same positions. Things have been working well and change is hard. So I would endorse the status quo, but we can take public comment on that.
You want to trade spots? No, I'm fine with Mark continuing. But I'm also open to you taking the vice chair or any other role that you'd like.
I'm open to any of the roles. I'm also fine with Mark retaining the chair position.
Well, I appreciate that. I have tried to do my best as the chair and keep the meetings moving along and ensure that we embrace our objectives and make it happen. So, I'm open to any suggestions you have, but I do honor the position of being the chair.
Should we take public comment if there is any, and then I'll.
Okay, let's go ahead and do that. We'll take public comment on 9A.
If you are in the boardroom and you would like to make a public comment, please come up to the podium. And if you're online, please raise your hand and we will take any public comments in the boardroom first. All right, looks like there is no public comment in the boardroom or online, so we will take it back to the board.
Mr. Chairman, hearing no strong opinions to the contrary, I'll move that we retain the officer listing as it was presented here and as it exists today.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion approves 4-0.
Okay. All right, we'll move on to 9B, the draft fall 2025 Los Osos Basin Lower Aquifer Water Quality Monitoring Results and updated chloride metric.
Yeah, so as the board knows, biannually, which is a frustrating word because it has 2 definitions, but in this case it means twice a year. We have a monitoring program where we collect and compile water level and water quality data for our basin at select locations. And then we provide a report to the BMC on those results. and we update our metrics in most cases, though, as we discussed, we didn't in this case for the water level metric for the reasons described. And then we provide that presentation to the board for their information and comment. And then ultimately, and that presentation is in a draft form. And then ultimately that data gets sort of finalized and incorporated into the annual report that we bring back to the board typically sometime in May of the following year. So, a long way of saying we have the draft fall 2025 metric data to share with the board. Speaking specifically to the metrics, we've updated our metric graph for the water level and chloride metrics. As discussed, we only updated the chloride metric. We saw an increase in the chloride metric from the spring level. It didn't exceed the previous high of the last fall for the chloride metric, but we did see an increase, though it's still falling within the range of values that we've had if you incorporate last fall's level. And then the water level metric didn't get updated, but we also provided the water quality data that's associated with the chloride metric as well as other chemical constituents in your agenda packet. And just some quick notes on that. LA10 or the Rosina well is a well we talk about a lot. It's double weighted in the metric. The value that we collected as part of the fall monitoring showed evidence of borehole leakage as shown by as indicated by the elevated nitrate levels. And so Cleith Harris geologist replaced it with a similar a value collected in a similar time frame that it didn't show evidence of borehole leakage. And then LA11, Pasadena, we showed chlorine slightly down from the previous record high of last spring. Palisades showed a record high for chloride. LA18 showed an increase in 2025 over historical, but there's some additional analysis that Cleith Harris needs to do, and I believe that they will do that before the annual report gets published. So we'll have some more information on the analysis of the ion ratios as it relates to the seawater intrusion. And then LA14 and LA16 are the two wells that we modified, so they're new to our program, or at least the data that we're providing for those wells represents new portions of the basin, as they previously were combined Zone D and E wells and now are dedicated Zone E wells. And so LA14 indicated seawater intrusion is not present at that location, which is consistent with our estimates of seawater intrusion in Zone E, as shown in the contour figures in the annual report. And then LA16 did show seawater intrusion, which is also consistent with our contouring of Zone E chlorides in the annual report. There was a comment earlier about an increase in the chloride concentrations at LA16. I believe it was referenced at Broderson. I believe it was referencing this data point. And we did see an increase from, I think it was 130 to 300. But we really only have 2 data points at that location. So it is noticeable, but it's hard. We don't really know what that's telling us just yet in terms of long-term trends. But as I indicated earlier, that is an area where we already predicted that there was intrusion in Zone E. So that concludes my presentation on the fall 2025 water level and chloride metrics.
Yeah. Thank you for going into detail on LA 14 and 16. I appreciate that because I was kind of wondering about that too. I saw that increase, and just that explanation helps understand. And I'm not glad to see it there, but I'm glad that we predicted it the way that it was,
It's nice to have consistency
Yeah,
with
right.
our, yeah.
Okay, any other comments before we go, to public comment? Questions?
I'll just make the same observation. It does look like some of these numbers are going up. Of course, Golden State Rosina, 290 up from 210 previously, but 360 before that. So, and then also your Cabrillo well did go up. It went to 130, I think, from 100. So these numbers, I think, are important. We are still getting our feet under us with the transient model and understanding the overall water quality picture still, I think. But these are probably the best evidence we have currently of what's actually happening in the groundwater basin. So I just want to make sure that we are paying attention.
Yeah. Okay, no other comments. Let's go to public comment on action item 9B.
If you have a public comment and you're in the boardroom, please come up to the podium. And if you're online, please raise your hand. We will take any public comments in the boardroom first.
Hi, Lynette Brooks. I just gave you a graph. But that graph, number one, we all know LA10 bounces all over the place. Or, oh, this time it had more nitrate, so we picked a different number or whatever. So LA10 is really makes that chart look really weird. The other thing, of course, that chart doesn't show really well is that, of course, there's seasonal fluctuations also. It's not real consistent, but in general, especially if we've had a good water year, we would expect spring chloride levels to be a little lower. The fall level probably indicates more what's happening because we're actually pumping. People are watering, fields are being watered, all of that stuff, which is why I made that graph. I actually also made one for the spring, but after I got here, you see the funny staple mark at the top there. After I got here, I realized I hadn't added the last 2 data points, so it was kind of worthless. So I didn't think I would give it to you. That's about it. As you can see, if you're just looking at, consistent seasonal and without LA10, those levels are going up. And we know that. You guys know it. We know the 1860 isn't sustainable. The model said that. I wish you guys hadn't done the 2000 because now it's being misused by the county, but you did do it. But anyway, I hope you all keep, urging the county to remember that number, that 2000 isn't really what's happening yet. And, show them the data. It isn't sustainable right now. We know that. So thank you.
It looks like there's no further public comment in the boardroom online, so we'll bring it back to the board.
Okay, thank you. Any further board member comments on this item?
Just a quick question. The annual report has to get finalized before the end of June. Is that correct, to be lodged with the court?
That is correct.
Okay. Look forward to that.
Okay.
Yeah, and I would just add, and I mean it this time. We are going to update the metrics. I know we've talked about this a lot, but yes, that the goal is to do that. It's been something we've talked about a long time because of the issues associated with LA10 or Rosina issues we talked about with water level metric, and so I think we're long overdue, and it's a high priority for staff and technical consultants.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So, recommendation to receive and file?
Receive and file.
You have a comment?
I actually have more of a question. So,
Okay, sure. Go ahead.
yeah, so I think this graph may have, I think it is in I don't know if it's in the Basin plan, but it goes back a ways before my time for sure on the BMC. maybe somebody can humor me and help me understand where it came from and what exactly we're trying to represent with this.
The chloride metric graph?
And what-
I'll be more specific. So I know we have in this graph, we're always showing the both the real history, but then we also have the dotted lines. And so I just want to understand what it is that this graph was created for and what it is showing. And if at any point, as we are not following that trend, I mean, we keep using this graph. I'm just curious what it is and what it's for.
Yeah, great question. And I wasn't here for the original development, but I've had a number of conversations with Cleve Harris and obviously the BMC. I mean, this is a graph to help simplify, and aggregate a lot of data. And, as you can see from the data tables that get included as backup to this graph, there's multiple constituents, for multiple wells throughout the basin, and it's hard to track. And so that just generally the concept of the metric, and I know this, is just developed to help, I think it's boil it down to a single number that we can track, season over season, year over year, to see sort of long-term trends. That's the intent of the metric graphs. But then specifically, I think there's maybe a reference to those dashed lines. Those were the best available projections at the time of what the water level and chloride metrics would do over time with implementation of the basin plan. So,
In particular, the wastewater treatment.
okay, yeah, see, that's helpful. Yeah, and particularly with the wastewater treatment plant and the disposal at Broderson leach field. And so it was our best best estimate, however you want to characterize it, of how trends would continue as we took implemented physical, using adjudications, physical solutions, or, to address the basin sustainability problems. I would point out, however, we have a much better tool now in the transient model to make these types of predictions. And that's something I've talked with Cleve Harris about in the metric updates. Opportunities to use the transient model to predict how we think water levels, chlorides, other conditions in the basin are going to change over time. Similarly to how we use the transient model to predict how seawater intrusion could, intrude or not intrude further into the basin over time. And I think what we can use those predictions for as sort of interim milestones, in theory, if our sustainable yield values are correct and we're pumping below them and the model says we're not going to see seawater intrusion, then we shouldn't see seawater intrusion. And when we start to see actual observed conditions in the basin diverge from what the model predicted would be happening, that would start to indicate that there's something that's not correlating between the model and the physical conditions in the basin. And it's not going to be perfect, but if it starts to diverge significantly, that's kind of a red flag for us to maybe reassess the calibration of the model or some of the other assumptions or inputs that are put into the model, because the basin's not predicting like the model predicted it would under a given set of operating conditions. And so it's probably a long answer, but yeah, the intent is to at least, because we've had these water level and chloride metric targets from the basin plan, but with these graphs are sort of intending to show that it's going to take time to reach those targets. It's not like we're going to hit it in the next 6 months. In this graph, the historic analysis said it would take potentially, I don't know, what is that, 30 years to get to the chloride target. And so this is a way that we can sort of track what the basin's doing relative to the predicted future conditions. And again, I think we can update those predictions with the tool that we recently developed.
Okay, I think that answered my question. But all of that being said, this then can be replaced probably by our transient model. Okay. And so going back to some of the narrative that we hear around the transient model related to its uncertainty, that's true in both directions. So that's both the upper and the lower limits. And what we're seeing year over year is that what we're doing, even in spite of our best conservation and all these programs, and I'm just looking at it with my naked eye, it looks like it's going up. It doesn't look like it's going down. I know we see those drops, and there are probably people who understand that even more than I do, but from just a trend perspective, it doesn't look like it's going down. And so if our transient model also said that 1,830 acre feet was beyond what we should be pumping, I think there's a lot of red flags here. And so I think this graph is a bit of a distraction at this point. If we could find something else, maybe more based on the transient model to represent what you're conveying in this, it would be really helpful. Because for me, what is the use for this graph now at this point? So anyways, I think that's my comment.
Yeah, thanks for that. I think that's good insight. I think we talked quite a bit about how pumping distribution matters in the sustainable yield evaluation and adoption this fall, and it does. The sustainable basin yield metric, where we divide production by sustainable yield, doesn't factor in distribution. And like we've talked about extensively, 1830 at one distribution will cause seawater to intrude, 2000 at a different distribution won't. And so one of the things we've also talked, Cleith Harris really has proposed this with the basin metric update, is maybe even moving away from a single metric and looking at, I don't even know if you call it a metric anymore, but targets for individual wells. Because again, distribution and location in the basin matters, as seawater intrusion isn't a uniform front. There's preferential pathways. As you shift pumping production in one area, it impacts intrusion and conditions in that area and in other areas where you relieve pumping. So it's a dynamic situation. We try to model and track it as best we can, and we're constantly trying to improve our assessments and our tools that we use to assess it. But yeah, so again, looking forward to bringing some updated recommendations for how we track health of the basin moving forward.
Yeah, we can add that to our list of modifications. Something we need to look at. Those are points there. Okay. Anything else, Beth? So we have a recommendation out there, right? Is that receive and file? Okay. All right, we'll move on to action item 9A, approve use of technical support services for preparing enhanced agricultural irrigation water use estimate.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Zimmer. Yeah, so this is something that very recently got brought up by Cleith Harris as they're working on development of the 2025 annual report. One of the things that they've done is develop the estimate of ag water production for 2025 as required by the stipulated judgment. We have to develop estimates of all groundwater production in ag and others. And one of the things that, they observed in that is that this 2025 estimate is, I think, probably the lowest we've had on record. And it was attributed to, or one of the primary factors was attributed to low evapotranspiration or evaporation rates in the Choro Valley Simus weather station, which is what we use under our current methodology for estimating ag demands for estimating evapo or transpiration in the Los Osos Valley. It's the closest Simus station we have. And so, kind of for a combination of reasons, one, just that we got a lower than historically estimated number. Two, if you'll recall, back in March of 2024, we got a presentation from Blaine Reilly on some work that Cleith Harris had done on behalf of the county that looked at some different methodologies for calculating ag demand that incorporated satellite evapotranspiration technology. And there was a recommendation that maybe we could consider incorporating that new technology into the BMC's ag demand estimate methodology. We didn't do that last year. There was a lot going on last year, like we talked about, and a number of other initiatives that we were tackling. But for a variety of reasons that I've just described, we have a recommendation that we would like the board to consider incorporating this satellite evapotranspiration technology into the calculation of this year's ag or 2025's ag irrigation pumping estimate. And there's an additional cost associated with that of $5,000 to do this. Basically, it requires doing two estimates, one the historic way, and then doing the second one where we collect the satellite data and input it into the soil moisture budget. And then what we would be able to do is then present both estimates to the BMC as part of the annual report. And then we can, make some decisions on, which number we want to use and or which methodology we'd like to use moving forward. But in theory, the benefit is that we would be getting Los Osos Valley specific estimates of crop evapotranspiration, whereas right now we're using Toro Valley estimates from a weather station, and then we're having to use a correlation factor to try to account for the differences between the two coastal valleys. And then I just a note about budget. We currently have $15,000 in the adopted calendar year 2026 budget for these types of technical support services.
And Mr. Chairman, if I could, this is a technology we're using in the Paso Robles groundwater basin to great effect. And we had the test run of this that showed that it correlated very well over a limited amount of time, and that it was tested. And what we're planning to do here is to expand that as a regular feature of monitoring the basin.
That is correct.
I mean, in essence, the conclusion in the Paso Robles groundwater basin is this is accurate enough that we don't need to meter the wells, the actual extractive, consumptive use, as we call it, which is that water which leaves the basin due to the ET of the plants, is accurately estimated by these Landsat satellite images. It's a really positive way. So we have verified that this is a workable technology. It's applied all over different places in the state. And so it's a tremendous benefit to our management efforts here.
Okay. My only comment is just receiving it last minute. It seems like we could have brought this at the staff level. They could have talked about it a little bit, and just noting.
Yeah, no, and that's fair. We got it. I think yesterday was when it was brought to our attention. I'd like to thank Jamie for her heroic efforts to put together a staff report and an updated agenda packet, understanding that, typically we'd like to run this through staff and then the board. We just, given that we had a board meeting this week, that it was a special meeting, we had the opportunity to get in front of the board and that we could do the work through the normal course of the annual report preparation. But I do apologize for the late notice.
Okay, thank you.
I have one clarifying question. Is the item up right now for us to spend $5,000 for Cleith Harris to spend $5,000 on this monitoring is that what this is?
Yeah, it would be to authorize Cleith Harris to $5,000 of additional budget from our technical contingency line item do this additional work and present it in last year's annual report that we'll receive this year.
Okay.
So I think that's the urgency, is that we want it. The reason for the last minute inclusion and not a staff discussion on it.
Okay, and it's only for
Fine.
ag users?
Yes, it would only apply to the ag water use estimates. That's the only portion of the water production estimates where we use the soil moisture budget model. Yeah. We have other methodologies for rural residential, and then obviously metered production for purveyors.
Okay, I understand. And then, forgive me, but does this not fall under the county's monitoring? I mean, the purveyors also pay for the infrastructure to monitor our customers. I'm just sorry for asking the question. That's what comes to mind for me on this.
I don't know that the county has necessarily a specific program for this. It's sort of basin by basin. Maybe we'll let Blaine speak to that.
So the county has been funding Cleith Harris to develop that soil moisture budget tool, and we're using that in other basins. But in each of those basins, the individual basins are sort of using that for whatever purposes they find value. We're using the Paso Robles groundwater basin to, as Supervisor Gibson indicated, to estimate agricultural consumptive water use on a field by field basis. And really, but we've invested in the soil moisture budget tool that Cleith Harris has developed, and we're making that available, to be used for this basin.
So the theory of the cost is the cost is the incorporation into the BMC's report. It's not, the county has already contributed by providing the data. Now it needs to be brought into the report. That's what this cost is.
That's correct. Cleith Harris will just take the 12 months worth of precipitation data and ET data that's available, and then use the soil moisture budget to make those consumptive use calculations for the annual report. For instance, something similar to the annual reports that are being done in Edna Valley are being co-funded by the two different GSAs. City of San Luis Obispo contributes to that. In the Paso Robles, all 5 GSAs contribute to the cost. So it's county has developed the tool, funded the development of the tool, make it available all those basins, and then they use it as they wish. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, we'll go to public comment on action item. If there's no other director comments, action item 9C.
If you have a public comment and you're in the boardroom, please come up to the podium. And if you're online, please raise your hand and we will take any public comments in the boardroom first.
Yeah, my name is Robert Sarby. And as I recommended last year, you can install the plume technology on any unmetered well. The plume technology costs about $100 investment in hardware and an internet connection. Unless this is not feasible, I don't understand why it's not implemented. It will probably cost less than the $5,000 you intend to commit on the ag water estimate. In the alternative, why aren't you requiring meters on these wells? We're paying. They should be paying as well. And I asked 3 questions earlier. I don't think I got a real answer to any of them, but I'm going to try one more time. Isn't the purpose of the adjudicated basin to resolve disputes between the parties? Here we have a major dispute. This board has recommended zero growth. The county's going ahead with a 4.4% growth limit. Is this board going to go to the judge to resolve this dispute? Isn't that the purpose of the adjudicated basin? Thank you.
There are no further public comments in the boardroom, but there is one online. Jeff, all you have to do is unmute yourself.
Thank you. Good afternoon again, Jeff Edwards. And this isn't a lot of money, the $5,000, but I would submit that with additional staff time and the full all the implications of this are going to be more than 5,000. And so it'd be nice to know the real number. And this additional bit of information is, I can guarantee it's not going to change the minds of those folks that want flow meters on every single ag well, which, as we know, is unlikely. So it seems to be, I mean, I'm all for refining the data, but what the ag hovers around 650 acre feet per year. Are we going to know that it's 5 acre feet plus or minus? I just don't know, again, what the cost benefit ratio looks like. To me, it appears like it's paper over pipes. I think there are other priorities that both staff and Cleith Harris Group should focus on that are, again, much higher priorities. So, this is nice, but it's not essential. Thank you.
Right, there's no further public comment in the boardroom or online, so we'll take it back to the board.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion?
I do think I need to make one clarifying comment. So I have no objection to this technology. I happen to think that it works very well, and I think that it's very cost effective. I have no objection to this particular technology, and in fact, I think in Los Osos, it would be a great way for us to get a better representation of our ag users and the private well owners. That's not what my comment was about.
Thank you.
With that, I'll move staff's recommendation.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion passes 4-0.
Okay, that concludes our action item. Last item is adjournment. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate your time and input. Have a good day.
No UAC?
Nope.
People want us to lawyer.